What's up, Patreon, and welcome to another exclusive tutorial where today we're going to go ahead and create this windmill tulip design. Now, as always, there's links to everything in the post over on Patreon, so you're going to need to grab the palette, the canvas size, and the free brushes that I've provided for today. As always, be sure to share your designs with me over on Instagram when you're done. Thank you so much, as always, for all of your support. And with all that said, let's get started. So once you've created your canvas, the first thing we need to go ahead and do is go up to our actions and turn on the drawing guide, and we're going to edit the drawing guide. We'll just leave it as it is. The only thing we need to do is just increase the size up to max. What I'm trying to do is, if we hit done, is just work out where our center point is, and this will help us with our perspective point. So all we need to do is, with the empty layer and with our brush, let's just set it to say sketching for a minute. Any brush is fine. The only thing you'll need to see is the color. We're just going to put a dot smack bang in the center, just so we know where the center point is. So when we zoom all the way out, we've got this tiny little dot. Then what we'll do is we'll go to our actions and edit the drawing guide once again. On this occasion, we'll go to the option of perspective, and we're going to zoom right into that dot and just tap on it. And then if you hit done for a second and you zoom all the way out, you'll now see all these perspective lines running out from that center point, and that's our sort of vanishing point. So now we've got that, we can put a lot of things in place. So we're going to go ahead and we'll tap on that layer and we'll go ahead and clear it. We'll then go ahead and go to our colors. We'll grab this color here in the bottom left of the palette. We'll go ahead and drag it onto the screen. And then grabbing our cursor, using the freeform option, and make sure snapping is turned on in the bottom left. Just grab that top node and bring that down to your center point. You'll see the orange line, and then you hit your horizon, tap on your cursor. Then we'll go to our background color, we'll tap on that, and we'll change it to this purple here at the bottom of the second column from the right. Let's then tap away, and then let's get started on adding in the windmill first of all. So we're going to go ahead then and go back to our actions and edit the drawing guide once again. We're going to switch it to the option of symmetry on this occasion and make sure the option is set to vertical. And hit done when you're done. We'll then create a new layer. We'll go to our colors and grab the color in the bottom right of the palette. And your brush wants to be set to the option of calligraphy and the monoline brush. Now my size is currently set to about 14. It doesn't really matter what the size is. All that matters, if we go back to the layer and we tap on it, we make sure it's drawing assisted. So it has the little assisted label underneath. And we can get started with drawing in our windmill. Now I'm going to zoom out so we can get an idea for the full perspective and size, which we may adjust slightly after. But we're going to go ahead and draw in a bit of a diagonal line just to put it onto the ground, and then just go across the ground, maybe with a slight arc to the bottom. And then we're going to go ahead and go outwards from those points, just outwards a little bit like so, probably a little bit less than that even, just a little bit off the edge. And then we're going to go ahead and bring that in and then up towards the top and into a point towards the top like so. We can adjust the shape in a second, but if we go ahead and drag the color in for now, we can make some adjustments where necessary. So I'm going to go ahead and just bring that top area out just a little bit at the top, adding in that tiny extra little detail. And I want to go ahead and just flare that out at the bottom as well, just a little bit more to add in a bit more character. Make sure we fill in all the little gaps. And we've got our little windmill. So let's then go ahead and add in the blades that sit on the front. So we're going to go to our layers. We're going to go ahead and create a new layer, and we're going to go to our colors and grab the middle color in that far right column. We're then going to zoom in, and for a moment we're going to just use the symmetry option. So we need to go back to the layer, tap on it and drawing assist it. And we're going to go ahead and just draw in a line that is wider than our windmill. Doesn't matter about where you drop it, it's fine. Just draw in a line, hold it, and pop your finger on the screen to get a nice horizontal line. And we're going to go for something that's obviously wider. So something around about this sort of point is good. Then what we'll go ahead and do is we'll go to our selection tool. Using the option of rectangle and color fill turned on, we'll go ahead and increase the size of the blades. So I'm going to go back to the layer for a moment and tap on it and turn off the drawing assist, because we don't want this to be symmetrical. So we'll turn off the drawing assist, go back to our selection, and all we're going to do is on the right side here, just make a box that's just slightly thicker than the actual sort of main arm that we've created there, and let go. So if I tap on my cursor and zoom in for you, you can see what we need to try and achieve. And then we're just going to replicate that on the opposite side, but at the top. So I'm just going to go ahead and just about work out where it is. I'll go back to my selection tool and just about work out where that point is, but do it on the top half instead. And the same sort of thickness as well. And we'll let go. Tap on our selection tool when we're done. Then what we'll do is we'll create another new layer. We'll go to our brush. We'll go into the option of textures and we're going to use the grid brush. Now with the brush set to 16% size, all we're going to do just around this blade here on the right, making sure we are of course on a new layer, which we are, we're just going to go ahead and with a good solid amount of even pressure, just fill in this area over here. So just around here like so. Then what we're going to do is we're going to zoom in, we're going to grab our cursor and we're going to just pick any line, any solid line and move it just down so that it touches the edge of the blade there. And what we're looking for, that chunky bit that we created, so for example here, mine's underneath, we want to make sure that the sort of line at the bottom here matches up to the grid. And then we're going to count 1, 2, 3 down, making sure they're all full all the way across, so that we can go to our selection tool, turn off color fill and zoom in, and we're just going to make a selection that's the same sort of width as that chunkier bit that we made. So I'm going to go ahead and just draw a selection around these here until they're 3 high, just like so. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to invert the selection, go to the layer, tap on it and clear it. So we've cleared everything but that grid. And if you zoom out, you've now got the sort of blade grid system there. And then when we zoom out, we've got the grid there ready to go. We can swipe it to the left and duplicate it, grab our cursor and move it to the top of this one over here. And hit your cursor when you're done. So it should just sit in the middle of your sort of blades there. Then go to the layer and pinch all 3 of those together onto one layer. So all the blades are on there now. And swipe it to the left and duplicate it. Grab your cursor and we're going to go ahead and rotate it twice, 45 degrees, so twice till it's upright. Tap on your cursor when you're done. Then we're going to go ahead then and go back to our layers. We'll pinch the 2 blades together so they're all on one now. We'll grab our cursor and we're going to just add a little bit of an angle to this so it's not so perfect. So I'm going to move it off to the right side as if the windmill's facing this way. And then I'll grab distort and sort of pivot that back a little bit like so. Squeeze that down even more on that right side just to add in a bit more angle to it. Just a little something like this. Just so again we've got a bit more of a less of a perfect angle, and I'm going to rotate it too just a smidge as well. So again, it's not quite perfect. I might even rotate it a little bit further and let that just run to here. I'm going to tap on my cursor when I'm done, and we've got our windmill then in the distance and all the pieces for it. We're then going to go ahead now and start to work on everything else. So the first thing will be down here. So we need to go back to our actions and edit our drawing guide. We're going to go ahead and change back to perspective, and it should still have the point in the middle of the screen, and hit done. And then we're going to go ahead and go down to this brown layer, which is our ground. You can rename it if you want to, but the brown layer is your ground. We're going to create a new layer above it. We're going to go to our colors, and we're going to go ahead and grab this first color in the second row. If we go to our brush library and we go down and we go into the option of organic, we're going to go ahead and use the twig brush. And the size for it is set to 58%. And what we're looking for is we're going to use 3 on either side of our center point. So this is our center point here. So I'm going to use 1, 2, 3 and 1, 2, 3. And we're going to fill that in. That's going to be our middle lane of our tulips. And all I want you to do at this stage is just to flick this brush all the way up. So lots of small flicks. So these are all the sort of stems of our tulips, and make your way further back. So down here, you want to sort of keep to a consistent somewhat height, and you can always make sure the roots are in the lines and then they can make their way out height wise. So you see what I mean? The tops there are just making their way out. Now you don't have to fill every gap because we do have 3 colors in total for this area. So some of them will be slightly darker, some will be slightly lighter, and that's why I'm not too fussed if there's gaps, and also if there are certain areas that are a little bit sort of scarce. So I'm just going to continue, and as I make my way back, I'm just making considerations for the line height that I'm drawing in. So I'm progressively trying to think about maybe making them a little bit smaller And we're not going to go all the way back to the windmill. We're probably only going to go back to about sort of this point here. But it's just a matter of just adding in some green so that if there is a gap in our tulips that we add in with the brush that I've provided, that we have a little bit of green just poking through so you get the full immersion of the scene. So I'm just going to dash in here. And these ones down here, we're almost sort of stood above them. So we've got like quite a sort of top-down shot of them. Just going to keep doing that here. Keep doing that till I get a good amount of coverage. Making sure I go all the way to the edge of the lines that we designated for this area. And again, as you get further back, just maybe tiny little dashes will look great back there. Again, you're probably not going to see them, but it's just in case. With that, we also need to go ahead and make space for the next area of the tulips as well, which is going to sit just to the side of it. And that's going to be a lane over. So we're going to leave one lane, and then we're going to go ahead and add in some green here. So just underneath the tulips that we can see at this angle. So we're just going to add in here some more. And these are going to roughly sit towards this sort of height over here. So the second lane across. So again, I'm trying to make considerations that as I make my way over here, they're going to get slightly smaller. A few more dashes, keep making my way all the way back. And again, they're going to go all the way down towards the same sort of point. So back there, we want lots of small little dashes. And then these ones here are just slightly bigger. And they can go a little bit higher, obviously. Again, the root wants to be in the lane, but the height of the actual sort of stem can make its way outside of the lane. And what I mean by lane is the lines that we can see on our perspective grid there. And of course, make sure you reflect that on the left-hand side as well. So we leave a lane and then we go ahead and add some in. And you want to sort of make sure that the heights that you add over here are similar to the heights that you added over on the other side. So this is just those little extra details that I always think that make the scene really come to life, just in case you do happen to see a gap. We don't just want to see brown dirt and nothing really in detail. It's just these extra little things that we may see and may look really cool and convincing if they're available to the eye. So we're going to continue here. I never usually skip ahead in my tutorial, so we can do it in real time together. So I've added in a good chunk there. Then we're going to go ahead and we're going to leave that for a moment because we will add green over here, but we'll add it in once we've added in our tulips. So once we've added in a good amount with this color, we'll go to our colors and we'll grab the darker tone just beside it, the second color in that second row, and just add in some of these. So these ones are slightly darker, well, much darker really in comparison to that one. And we're going to make sure we add in a good amount. Make sure there's plenty of stems and plenty of color. Likewise down here too. Again, not somewhat visible in this space, so you don't have to fret about it too much. I mean, really, you don't even have to do it, but it's totally up to you. Lots and lots of dashes. I'll add some over here too. That initial green is our sort of primary color for this little area that we're doing right now. So that just needs to make sure it's the best looking one out of all of them. These just extra darker tones just break up those greens. Then go to your colors and grab the next green across. So it's the third color in that middle row. And again, add some more. So this one's a bit more of a sort of punchy green. The initial one's a bright green, but this one's a very saturated green. I'm going to continue just to chop in some of these into the blades. And again, they'll look great if we get to see them. And what I mean by that is the randomness of the brush just may leave a gap. So we're going to just dash up and down here too. We may need to think about maybe just adding a few further down. Just a bit more green just down there. And some more over here on the right. These two, especially either side in these corners down here, are going to be really visible. So just bear that in mind. Like this edge here is going to be very visible. So we've added in all of those blades. Let's then go ahead now and start to add in our flowers. So we're going to go ahead and create a new layer. We're going to go to our colors and we're going to start with the red in the middle of that top section of 7 colors. So the red in the middle is the 4th color on that top row. And if we go to our brush, for you it will be under imported, but for me it's in a different category. And we're going to go ahead and use the Tulip gum. So it's a variation on the snow gum brush. I've just changed the actual head of it to match our tulips. So we're going to go ahead and set our brush size to around about sort of, let's go bigger than that. Let's go up to something where we can get a good amount of size, maybe about 14. It is pressure sensitive. So if you press really light, you'll get a small line, something really, really small. And if you press really firm, you'll get some massive ones. And it is determined by the angle that you draw at. So you want to make sure you start upright, and then we can just add in some tulips along here. So you want to go all the way to the bottom of the canvas, and you want to progressively take your weight off as you get further back. We're going to add more of them, but you want your tulips to get even smaller. So something like this all the way along here, and we can add in some more in the gaps where needs be. You can also add some that make their way onto the heads of some of these blades that we added on the edge. So add some of those in. Make sure they're nice and small and they match the perspective. Some of them that I just added in were a little bit too big. I'm just going to add that in there. We can even make the brush size a little bit smaller, probably down to 10 is a little bit easier to use. And we can zoom in and then just make sure that like we have a good sort of, essentially a solid strip of red running all the way, once you get further back here, all the way towards our windmill. And then we can go ahead and purposely just add in a few on the edges there that run astray. Just a little bit more and a little bit more natural. And just pressing, adding in a little bit more of them, making sure it's nice and solid, and it runs all the way to the bottom of our canvas. We'll then go ahead and make our way to the left, and we'll make our way to the right. So we're going to go ahead and grab the third color on that top row, and we'll add in the left hand side. So same sort of idea, we add in some nice large ones here with some good amount of pressure. Make sure you add it on the top of the heads on the left, and then as you get sort of further back, we're going to make sure they get smaller and follow the same sort of perspective and sizing as the ones you just added in red. So you don't want to have any huge ones back there if you've not made the size just beside it in the red column nice and big. See what I mean? We've got to make sure everything's nice and consistent. So we're just adding a few here. Some that just run into that little channel will look nice, that's fine. A few like that. We'll then go ahead and go to our colors and move to the next yellow along. So it's the second color on that top row. And then at this point, we're just going to go ahead, and there is technically a lane here where there's a gap. So these two now, where we've got these two lanes here, we're going to run yellow all the way in that space. So again, we want to make sure we're starting kind of upright, so our flowers are nice and pointing upwards, and then we're just going to run that. And because of perspective, the two are going to get so close together that they eventually sort of touch. Likewise in the gap as well. There will be a slight gap, but just not a very big one. So we're just going to run that like so. They're very close, but we've got a little bit of a gap to show the distance sort of in between there is a lane. And if we go to our colors and move along to the top left color in the palette, we're then going to go ahead and add in another lane, and then we're going to make some really small ones in the distance. So we'll make a marker of our size at 10% for a moment. And then in this lane, we're going to go ahead and just add in some more. Now, we want to make sure our pressure is a little bit smaller because, again, these are further back. So we're just trying to make sure I'm convinced the person looking at your design that everything matches up correctly. So a little something like that. You can see some of them are a little bit astray, and I'm fine with that. And we've got the nice little gap in between to show that sort of muddy area. Then what we'll do is we'll make our brush size a lot smaller, maybe around about sort of 4%. And we're just going to create little lanes. So we're going to kind of imagine that there are like a circle of lanes of sort of tulips all pointing towards the windmill in the center there. So if we go ahead and just start to run in some more lanes in towards it, and we want to make sure they're a little bit more angled than that. So just making sure we get them close together a little bit like this, and then make your brush size even smaller. So let's make a marker at 5 and then make another marker at 2. I'm going to go ahead and just make my way across the horizon in towards the center. And then I'm going to just basically just like create like lines and try and leave the odd little gap in between to pull off as if there's more and more and more, just like an infinite amount of tulips there off to the left. So if you leave little streaks in the middle of them, you'll really pull that effect off. So then let's repeat everything we did on that side on this side, but with the colors that we need to now go that way with. So go back to the option of 10%. We'll go to our colors and we'll grab the red, so the one to the right, and it's the 5th color on the top row. And then again, we'll add in some more tulip heads on here. Again, the angle that you start with is very important. So let's add in some tulips on here and make our way in towards that center point, making sure your pressure gets nice and light. I take my pressure and my pen off the screen at that point, just so I'm in full control and I can make sure that they're very, very small. And again, I'm now just trying to make sure the top of all the sort of stems that we added have a good, nice sort of petal head on the top of it. A little something like that. We can even make them a little bit wider if you want to. We can come back and add some in if needs be, if you want to fill in any gaps, but just make sure that you do have a good amount of overlap. Then go to your colors and go to the next color along. So it is the 6th color on that top row. Same rules apply. So just take a look where you've got the heads of these ones here. The next line here is the one that we need to start with. So we're going to go ahead and again, make sure our starting angle is nice and sort of upright. If not, slightly facing inwards would be great, but slightly upright, and then just fill in this whole channel all the way along, and then making sure it gets nice and small with your pressure all the way to that center point. And let these get quite close to each other, that's fine. We don't want a bumpy line though. We want to have a nice sort of uniformed shape to them. And then making that go a little bit higher, that's fine. That one's quite full, that's fine, I don't mind that. Then we'll then go to our colors and move across one more color to the 7th color on that top row, and we'll do exactly the same. So we're going to look for the next singular lane, and we're just going to go ahead and add in some more. So if we go ahead and just change our brush size down to 5% now, and add in this channel of tulips, making it all the way down into the center point, and then just adding in some more, just to fill out the whole lane a little bit more, letting that run all the way down to the end. And then just like we did before, we'll just go ahead and then use the next lane to create another lane of tulips. So again, we'll make sure that they start a little bit upright. Let that pressure run all the way towards the center point. And then we'll go ahead and reduce our brush size down again, maybe down to about 2%. And just on the right, we're going to create a streak across the horizon so that there's more purple tulips in the distance. Then we're just going to create little sort of streaks and lines that run towards our center point, not concrete in terms of their structure and size. And we can just leave little gaps in between that will pull off that massive field. And there we go, we've added in all of our tulips. Now, as I mentioned, we've got a few gaps in here. So we're going to go back to our layers and go down to the blades of grass that we created and go to our colors. We'll go ahead and grab the first color in that 2nd row and go back to our brush of the twig. And maybe our brush size needs to be a little bit smaller, so we'll drop it in the middle of my points there. I've got 33%, and just in here we're just going to add in lots and lots of dashes just to kind of fill in the gaps. And you can be a little bit sort of naughty here and maybe just create some squiggles if you want to, just to speed up the process, but otherwise you can do exactly the same full process. And I'm going up a lane as well, just to add in some green underneath in some of the gaps. That's all you need to do, just a little bit of green, and then do the same on the right side. So we'll go ahead and just add in some where I can see some gaps basically. I'm just trying to make sure that maybe we can see a smidge of green. Or something like that. And maybe a little bit under these ones there in the distance. Maybe even make my brush size a little bit smaller now, down to about 12%, and definitely just add in some more scribbles. I'll go back to the left hand side as well. When things get further away, we don't get too interested in the sort of distant details, so we don't have to spend too much time on them, but just making sure there's a little something going on. And a little bit of green really will help the whole design as well. So there we go, we've got all of our tulips in place. Let's then go ahead and add in the trees that are going to sit on the horizon. So we're going to go ahead and go to our layers. We're going to create a new layer, and we're going to drag it all the way to the bottom underneath the horizon ground layer here. We're then going to go to our colors. We're going to grab this color here in the bottom right of the palette again, and we're going to go ahead and use the tree stamps that have been provided in the description down below. So once we've found our tree set, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to work with 12, 14 and 15. So tree silhouette 12 and 14 and 15. And with the size roughly around about sort of the 15% mark, we're just going to create a forest in the distance. So we want them to be probably a bit smaller than that even. So I'm going to go down to about 10, 11, and I may even just use the tops of the trees, but just creating a forest in the distance. I'm tapping a few times and then I'll switch my brush to the next one, so maybe number 14, and reduce the size down to about 9, and then just add in a varying amount of trees, and different sizes and different weights will be good. Reduce the size down to maybe 7% and create some much smaller trees. They don't all have to be super uniformed. We can then change our brush to number 15 and again make it nice and small, maybe around about sort of that 8 to 9% mark will look quite nice. You can leave a few gaps, and I like to tap a few times with the tree stamps just to not make them look so uniformed and quite so stampy, so that they don't look quite so much like a repeating pattern. And you can see I've tried to somewhat create a bit of a sort of bigger area and then let that just naturally fade off. And then we'll replicate that on the left hand side. So we'll go ahead and add in some more trees here. I'll continue with the one I'm using. It doesn't really matter what your tree is. I'm just tapping up and down a few times just to create some varying sizes. I'll go to my brush and change it back to number 14. And we'll go ahead and add some more of these. And you can stack them a few times and make them a little bit higher. You don't always have to make them a big dense forest either. You can leave big gaps in there if you want to. Going to number 12 again. I'm going to go ahead and just chuck this one in. These ones are a little bit bigger and I'm fine with that. A couple of larger ones will look quite cool against the smaller ones. But if you just use the top of the tree, you can then nicely sort of leave some with a much larger stamp in there. So I'm going to leave mine like that. I may even just add in a few more here just to bulk that out a little bit more. We have a nice little forest that runs in behind our little windmill there. Now, taking a look at the layers, we also need to make some corrections to where things lay. So I'm going to grab the windmill and swipe on both of the layers for it. And I'm going to drag it down and I'm going to put it underneath our flower heads there, so our tulips. Now, if we go down to the ground layer here for a moment, we're also going to go ahead and add some stuff to that. So we'll go to our colours. We'll grab the colour just beside it, the second colour on that bottom row, and go back to our brush in organic and using that same twig brush that we were using, we're just going to add in some little sort of scrapes and scuffs in the ground down here. So with a brush size maybe around about sort of 20%, just some little scuffs left and right and maybe a few diagonal. They don't have to be perfect, and it looks as if the layer is assisted, so I'm going to tap on it and turn off the drawing assist so I'm nice and free. I can create whatever I want. And just some little sort of scuffs of brown in the mud basically. I've got some little areas of something a little bit dead maybe in between. Just break up the ground a little bit. They don't all have to come from the sides, just little extra piece in there, just a little bit of extra detail. Something like this. And we'll go to our colours and also grab the colour in the bottom right of the palette and just add in some darker tones in there as well, just to add in some contrast against those lighter areas. So little scuffs in the dirt, little scuffs in the dirt, like so. So we now have everything we need in order to really take this through the process and build up colour and lighting. So we're going to go ahead and go to our layers and create a new layer and drag it right to the bottom in front of our background, and we'll go to our colours. We'll grab the colour here at the bottom of the third column from the right, and we'll go to our brush library and go to the option of airbrushing, soft brush, and we're going to make it around about a large size, something fairly large, that we can add in a little bit of colour at the top here, so left to right, and just let that fade out at the bottom. So we're just blending in a bit of a darker tone at the top there. We're then going to go ahead and get started with the lighting behind the actual windmill. So we'll go to the layers and create another new layer. We'll go to our colours and grab this colour here in the middle of the second column from the right. And our brush again wants to be nice and large. What size is this? We can go even bigger than that if we want. We can go up to maybe around about 45. And we're just going to tap a few times just behind sort of the top of our windmill. Tapping a few times, you'll slowly build up a bit of a glow, a little something like this. We can maybe even get a little bit bigger than that. Then we'll go to our layers and create another new layer. We're going to go ahead and reduce the size of this now down to maybe around about 20%, if not slightly smaller, but we'll try it for a moment. We're going to go back to the layer, change the blend mode from normal to add. And then with that, we're just going to tap a few times just in behind our windmill to really boost that sun. So once you create like a big orb of colour, just go to your adjustments and go to Gauge and Blur. and swipe from left to right just to really diffuse it, really blend out that sun. And we take it to about maybe 20% like I've done, and you'll get that nice strong glow in behind the windmill, which gives you that silhouette effect. Now what we'll actually then also go ahead and do is we're going to move right to the top of our layers. We're going to go ahead and with the same color, we're going to create a new layer. We're going to go to our brush library and we're going to go to the option of luminance for you, and it will say the flare brush, and I've got it maxed out on size by the looks of it. And we're going to tap just on the top of the windmill here, so just tap in here. You may need to do it a few times until you get it nice and on position. You can then move it down though if you need to. And that obviously looks a bit weird right now, but if you go to the layer and change the blend mode from normal and change it to the option of hard light and swipe it to the left and duplicate it, if we then take a look at our design, we've got this beaming sun coming in from behind our windmill, and that's also going to be sort of built up on top of as well. But we can really get an idea now for the sun and where that main priority light source is coming from. Now while we're working on sort of the sky area, let's go down back to our layers. We're going to go down to this layer here that has that little bit of gradient at the top and create a new layer. And now we're going to paint in our clouds, and it's not as scary as it may sound. So we're going to continue with the same color we've got, so this middle color in that second column from the right. Our brush wants to be set to the option of airbrushing and the soft brush. And we're going to go ahead and make our brush size down to around about sort of 2% mark, maybe even 3 or a large 2%, it's up to you. And we're going to add in some clouds, and all the clouds want to be are just really light, just wobbly, squiggly lines. So just keep your pressure nice and light and just create some little squiggles down here with this color. Don't go too mad for a moment. That's all we need to add for a moment. Just a little something like that. And then just up from there, we'll also introduce another cloud just like here. In fact, I'm going to move that one just a little bit higher and just let that drop down on the left. So just little squiggly lines. Then up here, we'll go ahead and introduce another one. They don't all have to be like to the edge of the screen. They can be on their own. They can also be in a cluster. You know, you can create a little something like this. Just simple shapes for a minute will do the trick. Then over here on the left, we'll do the same. We'll just very lightly just scribble in a little bit of color. And I'll let this one maybe run off to the left. Scribble in another little bit just above it. We'll create another area over here. Nice big cloud. And we're trying to somewhat frame the center of our design by dictating where the clouds are looking. So I'm kind of rounding this off at the edge here. And then I'll create another one down here, just like I did on the other side, just to kind of, again, frame our design. You can use clouds in your environment to sort of focus a user's attention as to where you want them to look. You can add in some nice scribbles like this. Then just go to your colors. We're going to go ahead and grab the red, so the fourth color on that top row. And then on the back side of all of your clouds, we're just going to lightly press in some color. So we're going to go ahead, for example, up here. Let's just pick this area. I'll just lightly just add in a little bit of red on the back of these areas here. Just adding in a little bit of color. I'll do the same on this area here, and you go right over the top of those lighter tones we added in. We'll reintroduce them later anyway. A little something like that. And at the minute they don't look like much, and I know that, but they really will come together. We'll then go ahead and add in some color on the back side of this one, and likewise above it as well. Just bringing those clouds together. These are the shaded sides of the clouds. They're the sides that are not getting any light from the sun. So now I'm doing on the left side, for example, on this cloud over here. I'm overlapping that down here because the light source is pointing down. We're going to do the underside of these clouds in this area, and I'm adding in more squiggles just around it, which are just extra shadows on the clouds. Again, over here, we'll do the back side of these clouds over here. And you go right over the top of your lines, as I said, just introduce a little bit of that red. Keep it nice and light, don't go too crazy too quick. And you can just sort of add in a little bit of extra color off of them if you want on the back end, just to sort of bulk out the size of the cloud a bit more. But keep them all nice and random. Maybe I'll let this one just run across the screen even just a little bit more. Maybe I'll even add a little scribble of color there. Then we're going to go to our colors and we'll grab the orange just beside it, the top of the third column. And then with your reds that you added in, just scribble in some of this orange in random areas of the red. So keep it nice and light. That pressure there, for example, was probably a little bit too hard too quickly there. And again, you can go up to that bright line if you want, but I'm just randomly squiggling in some color just to add in varying tones to these clouds. I'm getting nice and close there to the edge of the bright area. That one there's again a bit too strong, so I'll keep it in the video for you so you can get an idea of what not to do, really. That's always my goal with that. And then fade out the back area. What you can then also do is you just increase the brush size maybe up to like 4% and just maybe streak in a few areas of color here in the sky with the orange, just a few very, very, very light streaks just in the sky, running across the screen. Then we're going to go back to our red at the top of the fourth column. We'll then increase our brush size up to maybe around about 7% and just like back down here, just at the bottom of the design, we'll just introduce a bit more red on that sort of horizon line, especially down maybe towards the corners. So we'll just add in a little bit of color down in those areas there. And then at the top, we're also going to increase the brush size up to about 10% and just build on top of that lighter purple we added and just sort of fade in a nice red tone at the top of this design and let that just fade down. So the top of the sky really will have a nice red hue to it. Increase the brush size just a little bit so I can get it done a little bit easier. So you can see that, just adding in that extra bit of red. And we can also, like we did with the orange, just maybe run the odd streak of red through the sky, maybe smaller than that, maybe around about 4%. Just the odd little bit of red just in the sky, just like a little streak here and there. Now, this is kind of where your clouds may come back to life a little bit. We're going to go back to our colors and grab the middle color in that second column from the right. With your brush size back down to about sort of a 2%, take a look at your shapes and then try to bring a few of the highlighted areas back to life. So you're going back on top and now we're just trying to create lots of sort of rounded, fluffy shapes. You can dot around, you can drag out the end of the clouds there. You can keep it nice and random. You don't have to do the whole line or shape that you've created, just little areas of color. We've got one final layer to add in later, but we're just adding in, reintroducing some of those lighter tones back into the sky, like over here. Likewise, the top of this area here, I can now nicely just think about just adding in a bit more color on this area over here. Add in the odd little scribble and bounce of color. A little bit more over here. Lots of squiggles. Just make sure it's nice and bouncy, nice and fluffy, and nice and random as well. Just create random wispy shapes, because a cloud is never perfect. It's never like a cartoon. So just add in lots of wispy shapes in there. Just see there, I created like a little hook almost of a shape, and that's fine. I'm cool with that. That will work out in the end. Add some extra bits to the underside here, and then maybe like an odd area of just light color. And I'm already starting to see how it's coming together just a little bit more with reintroducing these areas. And now I'm just adding in little scribbles in other areas. Nothing too much though. You don't want to make it too dense in certain areas. So you can always just undo it and just leave an area a little bit skinnier. Then what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go to our layers and create a new layer. We're going to go ahead and change the blend mode of it from normal to add. And then we're going to go ahead and make this brush a little bit smaller, and these are going to be the fine details. So I've gone down to about 1%. And then what we're looking for is to just add in some highlight in certain areas that are blatantly the lighter tones. So here, for example, I'm just going to scribble in nice and janky and shaky with my brush. In fact, you could even go to the brush and make sure under stabilization that none of it is turned up, which it isn't. So I can now be super shaky with my hand if I want to, and really just add in some nice randomness to these clouds. So these are the final details really that help your clouds now come to life, and also add like a bit more of a crispy fine detail to them. So here I'm just looking for areas that have got the brighter tone underneath, and I'm just going to scribble in on the underside. Don't have to do all of the cloud, you don't have to do all of it at all. Just areas that could do with maybe just the odd little scribble, and do less to start with, and also make sure you zoom out. Never get lost in those details. So we'll do the underside over here, add in a couple of little wispy bits here. Tiny small ones are fine. Go ahead and I'll go over the top of this cloud and also underneath it. Here we've got this beautiful big shape over there, so I'm just going to do that, and then I can like draw in a line but keep it nice and thin. You know, you don't have to make them all solid in terms of that amount of weight of color. You can make some that are just nice and thin and they just naturally just fade out at the edges. And I love that. You add in a lot more variety to the clouds. So down here, for example, we can go ahead and add in like a good chunk on here, and then maybe just let them just roll around in towards those areas that we know are a little bit more faint. Here I can definitely go ahead and add in a nice fluffy edge on there with a nice few crisp details. And you can always create just random little shapes of maybe clouds that we couldn't really see or we didn't actually create a shape for. That's fine. There's a couple more details down here. Lovely amount of detail. I love how this comes together. At the beginning, I can admit it does really look like, okay, where is Joel taking us with this? Because this does not look like a set of clouds, but it's all about just building up certain areas sometimes and just, as I always say, trusting the process, which of course there is merch for if you want to grab yourself a hoodie or a sweatshirt or a t-shirt. So little areas like this, again, try not to do too much. If anything, I've probably added a little bit too much over here, so I could probably erase some. And again, these are just things that I like to keep in the video so that you can see what it is I'm looking for. And maybe I'll just blend out the edge of that one and then maybe add in a little detail here. Here, I'm going to do like a nice line that just runs in underneath the bottom side here of this cloud and that just runs out to the right. And you can add in the odd little scribble on a cloud. Here I've got a super light little line. Maybe I'll just add in like a little bit in the middle that just disappears. So a little something like that. I've got this area here that I've not added any love to yet, so I will go ahead and just add in the underside of that. Add in a little bit more over the top. Some nice under areas there. And what you can then also do in a second is we'll add in a few more blending options to that. But you can see what I'm trying to do there. We're trying to focus the user's attention to the center by leaving that completely open. Here I will also just nicely just zigzag in some color, and I want to just also go back in and just add in little tremors with my hand, like literally just shaking, just to try and add in a random speck of detail that I'm not fully in control of. And that's life, isn't it? Like clouds, they are not perfect, they're not like the cartoons, as I said earlier, and adding in these odd little random tremor lines and stuff will just give some nice randomness to them. Sometimes drawing randomness is the trickiest bit. So once you've added a good amount of this detail here, just increase your brush size up to about sort of 2 or 3%. I'm going to go to 2. I don't want to make it too big. So with a 2% brush size, let's try that one more time. On the back end of some of your lighter areas, just blend them out a little bit. So just blend out a few of them underneath. So just blend out back into the cloud is what I'm trying to say. So up here, for example, I've got some lines here. I can just blend in with a really, really light amount of pressure. Just blend them back into the actual main body of the cloud. And we don't want to do all of them, but just a few. Here, for example, I'll maybe add in like a nice lighter patch in behind there. We're just trying to feather out a little bit of those very crisp details that we added in. That area there is probably a little bit too firm, so I'll undo that bit. And add in some lovely cloudy details up here. Adding in some in here. Lovely stuff, and that's all really come together. I'm really happy with how that looks. Taking a look at it, is there any that I want to further adjust? Maybe I'll just introduce a tiny little patch of color underneath there. Likewise there too. And at any time you can always grab your eraser with the soft airbrush, for example, and maybe just blend out some lines so that they do just transition and disappear into nothing. That'll look really cool. You can adjust some of the lines. You could be here all day, so we will move on from this stage in a second, but just I want to show you everything that you can do just to really add in those details and make it look really cool. So we've got some really beautiful cloudy details in there, and we will go ahead and move on. So because we've got this really cool area of lighting, down here now looks very flat. So we're going to go to our layers and we're going to go to our tulips. I'm going to swipe them to the left and duplicate them and change the blend mode from normal, and we'll change it to the option of add, which is immediately going to make them super bright, but don't worry about it, I will fix them in a second. For a moment, we'll tap on them and clip them to themselves. And then what we're going to go ahead and do is go to our eraser, go to the option of soft brush, and with about sort of a, maybe about 11%, just in behind our windmill here, we're going to add in essentially a shadow. So we're just trying to show that there's a shadow just around the sort of back end here of the windmill that's just blocking a lot of light onto these tulips. So just blending that out. And if we go back to the layer now and change it and drop it down to about 50%, we'll then have a nice brighter tone towards the outside edge. We'll just bring those colours out a little bit more. But what we will do, we want to emphasize the shadows. So we'll go ahead and create another new layer, tap on it and clip it into that stack onto the tulips. I will go to my actions at this point and edit my drawing guide and pick the option of symmetry and make sure it's the vertical variation and tap done. Then we'll go ahead and go to our layers, make sure we're on that layer and it says assisted. If it doesn't, tap on it and go to drawing assist. We're going to change our color and we're going to go to black. So double tap at the bottom of the disc, and with a brush size maybe around about sort of 5%, we're going to introduce some shadows along some of these lines here. So I'll reduce it for a moment down to 4% and just go down these lines here, just where the shadow of the windmill is just going to add in. Now again, I'm going to adjust this in a second, so don't worry too much. But what you do on one side, of course, is reflected on the other. So I'm just bringing down a little bit of shadow, and I'm trying to leave little specks here and there where a tulip maybe is just slightly raised higher, so it's going to get a little bit of extra love. But we've got that nice big casted shadow on the back here. So as I mentioned, we'll go to the layer, we'll tap on it and we'll change its blend mode to the option of overlay, and we will just reduce it down just a little bit. On my occasion, I'm going to drop it to 80%, but it will vary depending on how much pressure you've added. And then I'm going to go ahead and on the same layer, just maybe go back in and just darken up a little bit more just behind the windmill. Just a tiny bit more, so there's not a lot of colour going on back there. Then what we're going to do is go to our layers and create another new layer in this stack and tap on it and clip it into it. Tap on the layer and make sure it's drawing assisted. We're going to go ahead and go to our colours and grab the middle colour in the second column from the right. And with a brush size of around about sort of, we can go maybe a bit bigger than that, maybe about 11%. Towards the left edges where the light is hitting the tulips, we're going to go ahead and just paint in a area of colour. So a little something like this, and just let that just maybe come around a little bit. So on either side now, you should start to see that colour. Don't worry, we're going to adjust it in a second, but for a minute, I want to show you that you can just really show the lighting onto the tulips by just adding in the lighting colour. So by adding this colour on the sides, we're showing where that light is coming and hitting onto the tulips. So if we then go ahead and go to the layer and we change the blend mode from normal, and we actually scroll down to the option of colour, and we drop the opacity down of it ever so slightly, essentially what we're doing is just adding a very light hue. So I've dropped it down to about 65%, and we've just added a nice light hue onto the top of our tulips, just to show that there's a little bit of sunlight just hitting them and they're a little bit brighter. Now we're really in the deep end now, so we're going to go ahead and just add some details to the tulips. So we're going to go to our layers and we're going to go ahead and create another new layer, tap on it, clip it into the stack that's onto the tulips, and we're going to go ahead and change the blend mode from normal to add, keep the same color. We want to go ahead and then change our brush. Now I've actually gone ahead and created a new brush for you. It's called Minor Textures. For you it will be under imported right at the bottom. And what we're going to do is we're just going to use this brush about sort of 3% to start with, and we're going to go in and just add in some details to the tulips and just show a few brighter areas. So just some really cool, fun last highlights to the design. So this brush has a very strong texture to it, and with a brush size probably around about 2% actually, just go in here and where you can see the tops of some of the tulips in the actual pattern, especially on these near ones, we're just going to add in some of this texture and the little brighter highlight on top. So all this is just really random, really just easy to do highlights. We're just looking for the tops of some of the tulips and just adding in some brighter touches. You don't really want to spend too much time on this type of thing, especially with a type of design like this where it does have a somewhat painting aesthetic to it. You don't want to be sort of spending too much time adding in details like individual petals, especially with a field of tulips. You'll be here all day. So we're just using this brush, and the brush has so much texture to it and randomness that I'm happy that that's just where the lighting's catching maybe on some of these tulips. You can see the tops of them now have some of these brighter tones to it. Now for a minute we're done in this area. I don't want to add in too much, but just a nice little sort of randomness to the top of some of them will look great. And as a whole, regardless of what the texture is, you can now see that like some of them have a little bit more light to them. We will move across to the left and we'll do exactly the same. So the tops of some of these areas and clusters of tulips, and then these ones will look great because with this color, it's going to nicely just make some of them nice and bright and orange. So just, you want to make sure that you don't add it in sort of horizontal rows and repeating areas. You want to try and keep it nice and random and let that run all the way down to the end. You see, if I just literally just tap a few times, now we don't want to go all the way down there, but just as an example there, you could see by just tapping, you're basically adding in lots of small details, and each one is just the top of a tulip. So you can do that over here as well. You can just tap away on top of some of these bigger shapes that you can see. Not all of them, but just enough. And again, when you zoom out, you've added in some really fun highlights to the top edges. Do the same over here. Now you could have technically used a symmetry tool, but we don't want it to be super symmetrical. Each side is different anyway, so you wouldn't necessarily get away with it quite so much, but it would speed up a little bit of the process. So you can feel free to add that in if you want, but we're just going to dash away a few times in here and then make our way across a row to these ones over here. And again, just think about sort of dashing in, especially further down, just tapping in. Just tapping in, that's just a few tulips. And try not to do the full area. You don't have to do every single spot. Maybe the odd little one further back down there. Over here, we will also add some into these little lanes just beside. So just a few dashes. And I'm kind of tapping because I don't want dashes as such in terms of like streaks. I want just dashes, specks of highlights. And when you get to these ones here, before we did those nice sort of simple lines, that's where we're going to end for a moment. So do the same on the opposite side as well. Top of these yellow ones, just dashing in some of these little, well, I keep saying dashes, but I mean sort of punching in and just tapping away to add in these lovely brighter highlights on here. Tapping away in these ones here too. And then we'll go ahead and we'll reduce the brush size down to something maybe around about sort of 1 to 2%. We'll zoom in, and I'm not sure we'll get away with too much in here, but we're going to go ahead and basically just go along some of these lines and add in some highlights to these edges. So now this area here is getting a lot of sunlight, so we can just really streak almost all the way on top of it, and you can see those bright lines come into play. Just lovely bright lines in the field. And then if you zoom out again, don't get lost in those details. Look at that side compared to this side. So dull over here. Now we've got the beautiful sunlight over there. And we can do the same over here. We can go right across our horizon line. Bring those leaves to life, or petals and flowers, and just bring them to life. Use the texture of the brush just to keep that nice randomness to it. And go along those lines. Just adding in some nice dashes. Now at this point, if you're happy with it, you could leave it. What I'm going to go ahead and do though is I'm going to go back into my brushes and go to airbrushing and soft brush. Reduce the brush size down to 1/2% in that sort of area. And we're going to add in some squiggles, a bit like the clouds above. So I'm going to purposely make sure like certain areas are a little bit randomly patched up with a little bit more brightness. So a couple of random extra patches here and there, and anywhere maybe where that brush didn't really hit, I'm going to add in little squiggles. And especially then when we get into the rows of tulips here, I'll make the brush size a sort of a small 1%, a large 1%, small 2, and just add in little scribbles. Again, don't go behind your windmill because of course that is in the shade. And then at this point, we're just adding in little squiggles and little dashes, really just trying to look for the shapes of some of the tulips at random and quick and easy. I'm not thinking about it. I don't want to think about it because otherwise you create patterns and make it too repetitive. And then over here, I'm going to go ahead and just continue on. So just creating lots of little dashes in here where the sun's now peeking round and hitting these tulips here that are in the sun. And I'm going to create like kind of like little arcs over. So you can create lots of sort of arcs that are just like a whole of a tulip, maybe just catching some light like there. And just little scribbles and tremors in here will look fantastic. So zoom out, take a look, and then look at the two sides. Look at the difference now on here. We've got these randomness of these areas here, which is just a little bit of extra highlight. And to me, I really like that. I really love a crisp highlight. So I'm just going to go in here. I don't want something like that where it's a long sort of straight line. I want wiggly lines. I want to catch on the top of any tulip that just sits in the sun. Little randomness to it, little scribbles and wiggles will look fantastic. Just a little something like this. You can add in a few over here. We'll do the same in the red. We'll just continue to make our way around. So just little squiggles and little wobbles here and there. I might even make the brush size a little bit bigger at 2% because this is right in front of us, and just sort of try and catch the top of some of those highlights that I already added in, basically. Little something like that. Random squiggles and areas of highlight. And you kind of show then which ones are just making their way slightly up and out of the field and which ones are not. 1% again, I'll go over to this left side, add in some more squiggles and areas, and I can really get nice and jittery with it. Over there, add in some here too, just outline some of the tulip shapes that I can see. And we'll go into here too. So these are really some really final touches. We've got a couple of extra things just to do at the end, just to finish it off, but we are very nearly there. We are right at the end. So well done to you if you are making your way through. And I do plenty of these designs, so be sure to subscribe everywhere you can. So once we get round to here, we're then looking at those ones in the distance again, and I'm just going to scribble in some more in here. And these ones here, especially on the horizon, I'll just make sure I've got a little bit more colour in them. Nice and bright. Love that. If you zoom out, you've got these beautiful, beautiful details. Now the thing that will really make this come to life even more and kind of focus our attention towards the centre is a nice little vignette. So if we go to our layers, we go right to the top of them and create a new layer. We go to our drawing assist, so actions, and go to canvas and edit drawing guide, and make sure we're using the symmetry option of vertical still. Hit done. Go to your colours and double tap at the bottom of the disc to select black, and your brush wants to be set to the soft airbrush under airbrushing. With a brush size maybe around about 15%, you can even go bigger than that, maybe up to about 18. We're going to just darken up the bottom right corner here, so just in a curve. Now you need to make sure you go to the layer, tap on it and make sure it's drawing assisted. And we're just going to go ahead and just curve and create a bit of a vignette. Just take out these corners. We're not too interested in them. We just want to take them out a little bit. Just focus the attention a little bit more towards the center, and you can bring that vignette up the sides just a little bit. We'll also add one to the top as well. So just to go across the top and around the top corners as well, which again, focus our attention far more. It takes that darkness and just makes us look right in the center. Go around the edge. I love a vignette at the minute. It's one of my favorite things to do to kind of frame your design. Now there's one more layer we need to make, which I haven't added yet. If we go to our layers and we go to our little windmill here and we create a new layer in front of it and tap on it and clipping mask it, we go ahead and change the blend mode from normal and change it to add. And we switch back to the highlight tone for today, the middle color in that second column from the right. And just at the top of the windmill, with the brush size probably a bit smaller than that, maybe around about sort of, let's go down to about 9. Just where our light source is, we're just going to sort of in a circular motion just draw in and just really punch out the top of the lighthouse, the windmill, just so that you can't really see the top of it too much. You can just about get the idea for the shape, but just enough that the light is just so bright that you can make out the shape, but you can't quite see the very sort of fine detail at the top that could be there. Now some final adjustments which I always like to leave in. Potentially I would go down to the sky layer. Maybe I'll create a second layer just in case I mess it up. But with my color, let's go ahead and grab, say, let's grab the orange, the third color on that top row, and with a soft airbrush around about sort of 5%, just maybe introduce a little bit more warm tone in the sky with some more streaks, and just eliminate some of the purple that we were seeing there. So just sort of streaking in and maybe just blocking in a bit more of the cloud with a little bit more orange, just to add in some warmer tones in the sky. The purple is the really lovely backdrop, but just adding in this little extra warmer tone gives us the full impression of the sky being quite nice and warm, and then maybe a little bit more colour in behind the windmill itself. So if I now go up to my actions, I turn off my drawing guide, so we get rid of the line in the middle. I pinch with 2 fingers and we go full screen with 4. We end up with today's finished design. So I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. As always, please be sure to share your designs with me over on Instagram. And as always, a massive thank you to every single one of you here on Patreon for all of your support. And with all that said, have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one.